parliamentlive.tv 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 ParliamentLive.tv. 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 Parliament. Parliament.
Room Committee Room 4, sound. Committee Room 4, sound. Four, sound.
and to the point all round. Now, not all members will be able to participate in normal time, and I hope that there might be a bit of extra time at the end, and all the members who are not able to participate in normal time have indicated that they would have questions if there is time and extra time as well. So perhaps I can move straight to the start. And I really, before we get into the main bits of it, I think, Lord Frost, I should just say double congratulations to you. Firstly, for your elevation to the peerage, and very much welcome to our ranks in the House. I was there when you were actually inducted. I should congratulate you as well on becoming the National Security Advisor. And I suppose my very first question is, perhaps you could explain how you're able to discharge that duty, or has that duty yet begun, given what is going on in the Brexit negotiations at the moment?
Yes, thank you, Lord Kinnell. And thank you for your kind words. The answer to your second question is that I'm not discharging the second duty yet, is the short version. I'm focusing on the EU negotiations that we'll be talking about. So I expect to take up that role as soon as this process is substantively finished. And at the moment, one of the Deputy National Security Advisors is acting National Security Advisor for as long as this gap, which we hope will remain short, is in place.
That's very helpful, and thank you very much. Moving then to the main bits, the Prime Minister, of course, had a discussion with President von der Leyen at the weekend. And I wondered, in the light of that and all the recent developments, whether you could tell us when you think the Brexit negotiations will finish.
Yes, thank you, Lord Kinnell. First thing I would like to say is that we are working very hard to get an agreement. We would obviously very much prefer to have one. That's best for both sides. But obviously, if we can't reach an agreement, we'll be content to trade on Australia terms, as we say, and believe we'll prosper very much if we do so. But we are working very hard to try to get there. As to the timescale, I would refer you to the Prime Minister's statement that he made on the 7th of September, setting out some of the constraints in our minds about the process. And I don't think there's much I could add to at the moment to what he said on the 7th of September. It's obviously very important, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, to bring certainty to our many stakeholders about what is going to happen at the end of the year and at what terms. My job is just to work as hard as we can over the next 2 weeks to see if we can get an agreement in place by the 15th.
Thank you very much. Of course, there is a saying that a week is a long time in politics. The 7th of September was a good deal more than it's a lifetime away in political terms. So you're saying that really, and what he said then, out of interest, which just to sort of put it on the record is, and I quote, there is no sense in thinking about negotiating timelines that go beyond the 15th of October. But so you're telling us that that really is a hard deadline.
Well, I mean, the statement says what it says, and the Prime Minister has made his position very, very clear in that. And I think both sides in the negotiation need to take that fully into account when they're planning the next 2 weeks. Obviously, as we approach the 15th, and it is very close already, I will have to advise the Prime Minister on whether the conditions in his statement have been met or not, and we will have to consider the situation at that point. I'd only add that he was also clear in his statement on the 7th of September that our door would never be closed. Even if there was no basis for a free trade agreement, there was a good deal that would be worth talking about before the end of the year. There were lots of practical matters that we would need to cover. So in any circumstances, I would expect that to be happening. But there probably isn't much more I can add to what the statement says.
Thank you very much. And could we move to Lord Sharkey?
Yes, welcome, Mr. Gove and Mr. Frost. Following up on Lord Kinnell's question, can you give us some idea of what it is that needs to have happened by the 15th of October in order to pave the way for a deal? And what are the next steps, assuming an agreement is reached?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've made quite good progress so far, in my view, and the statement I put out at the end of last week really sets that out. This is a hugely wide-ranging agreement, and in many areas, the landing zone and the nature of the agreement is pretty clear, if not exactly pinned down yet. What needs to happen between now and then is that we need to make progress primarily in the areas where there are big gaps, notably fisheries, but also some of the level playing field issues, to some extent governance. We need to bring some clarity to the economic content of the free trade agreement parts of this agreement, because there are one or two bits of it that are not yet clear, and where the terms of the EU's offer aren't yet certain. So those are the main things in terms of outcomes that need to happen. Obviously, there is a huge amount of textual work that needs to be done, thanks to the position of the EU not to work on texts for the last 6 weeks to 2 months, and that will have to come after the 15th if we can get the outline agreement to that point. That's the reality of it now.
And so, what are the next steps after the 15th, assuming that agreement is reached on that day?
Well, there will then have to be sort of clarity on the precise text. And I think it's realistic to think we would only get an outline agreement on the main outstanding points. There's a good deal of textual work that would need to be done. Obviously, there are lots of texts sort of knocking around in the discussions, but we would need to sort of settle them down. There are one or two areas which are substantively important, such as the exchange of offers on services, which we would need to do rather rapidly on the basis of precedent. And then, of course, from the EU's point of view, they'd need to translate and tidy up the text and sign. We will then need to have a process at our end. Our assumption is there will have to be primary legislation for at least some elements of an agreement as wide-ranging as this. And, of course, the EU will have to take it through the Council and through the European Parliament. So there really is quite a lot to do, even after the 15th, to get everything in place and the agreement enforced by the end of the year.
Thank you for that. I noticed that the Commission has extended the equivalence for CCPs, our CCPs, until mid-2022, I think. Can you give some idea of when decisions on the other financial services equivalences may be reached and published? I mean, ours and theirs, not just theirs.
Well, we are both going through the process, and I think at this point there isn't much more I can say on the timing on either side. Obviously, we would want to bring clarity to that as soon as we possibly can, but I would defer to the Chancellor on that subject. We await decisions from the EU on most of the other areas, so we are in their hands. This was something that I think the political declaration said should have been sorted out by the end of June.
Yeah.
It's a pity.
Is it the case that we have already arrived at our own assessments?
I think there's not much further I can say. Certainly, the Treasury have been paying a huge amount of attention to this and been in fairly close dialogue with the EU over the whole subject. And when we're ready to make an announcement, when the Chancellor is ready, he will, I'm sure, do so.
I'm sure he will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And can we move to Lord Thomas?
Can I ask you about the consequences of Part 5 of the UK Internal Market Bill and the reaction of the EU by commencing proceedings? And first of all, I wanted to ask you, it's been said that the EU have acted in breach of their obligations, particularly the obligations of good faith. Was that the position, and is it currently the position?
Are you going to?
I think, thank you, Lord Thomas. I think the first thing to say is that the provisions there are intended to be a safety net It's intended to ensure that if there are areas that require to be addressed, as there are, that first of all, the Joint Committee should address them. And then if no agreement can be reached from the Joint Committee, then an arbitral process, of course, kicks in. But we reserve the right, and the legislation is there, to ensure that the integrity of the United Kingdom be protected if no agreement has been reached. I'd say, in addition, that the EU made it clear that they would be launching their own legal proceedings, and received a letter, of course, from President von der Leyen last week, in which she signalled her intent to do so. We entirely understand the reasons why the EU feel that this is an appropriate course of action for them, but without prejudice to that letter, we believe that progress can be made through the Joint Committee. And more broadly, on the question of good faith, I think that while negotiations are proceeding, and as Lord Frost has pointed out, proceeding in a way which gives us cause for steady optimism, then I wouldn't want to pronounce definitively on that question.
But can I ask you, if you're to take so serious a step as to say that people are in breach, very serious breach of an agreement which entitled the British government to put forward Part 5, surely it's only right that the evidence be put into the public domain. Otherwise, people think, well, there isn't any evidence.
Again, there are two parallel processes here, and I wouldn't want to prejudice the likely success of any conversations in the Joint Committee or the success of negotiations in the with respect to the future relationship. So again, previously in the House of Commons, I outlined some of the reasons why a fair-minded third party might consider that the EU had not been negotiating in quite the way we would have wanted. But I'm hopeful that, and indeed there have been clear signs that since the approval of the bill in the House of Commons, that the talks have been proceeding in a constructive way. So I don't think it would be helpful in terms of the negotiations to say much more.
But before taking a step which many think have had very serious adverse consequences for the UK's reputation, surely it must be right to be prepared to